A 3-year-old girl stunned everyone at the beach when she pointed to the ocean with a terrified look. But it was what her dog revealed right after that left everyone speechless. You won't believe how this story ends. And the most incredible part? This was just the beginning. Subscribe to the channel and find out what really happened on that shocking day. In the small coastal town of Pelican Cove, Maine, where salt permeated the wooden walls of every home and the rhythmic crashing of waves provided a constant soundtrack to daily life, a 3-year-old girl named Lily Anderson had become the subject of quiet fascination among the locals. Born to Sarah and James Anderson, longtime residents whose family had inhabited the town for generations, Lily was unlike any child anyone had ever encountered in their secluded community. From an extraordinarily young age, Lily displayed abilities that both amazed and unsettled the townsfolk. She had begun forming complete, articulate sentences before her second birthday and could solve puzzles meant for children twice her age. Her eyes, a striking shade of sea glass green, seemed to hold wisdom far beyond her years, as if she understood secrets of the world that adults had long forgotten. "That Anderson girl," the locals would whisper at Doyle's general store, their voices a mixture of awe and unease. "She's different, that one." But what truly captured the attention of Pelican Cove that summer, the warmest and calmest in living memory, was Lily's peculiar daily ritual. Each morning after breakfast, she would take her golden retriever, Max, a loyal and attentive companion gifted to her on her 3rd birthday, and walk determinedly down to the shoreline. There, she would sit motionless on a cluster of smooth rocks, staring out at the horizon without blinking, without distraction, as if waiting for something to emerge from the depths or for the waves to whisper a secret meant only for her ears. Sarah Anderson watched her daughter from the kitchen window of their weathered blue cottage that sat on a small bluff overlooking the beach, a mixture of maternal concern and curiosity etched on her face. "She's been doing it again, James," Sarah said one morning as her husband entered the kitchen, his fishing gear in hand. "Just sitting there, staring. It's been 3 hours today." James set his tackle box on the table and peered out the window. He could see his daughter's small form, perfectly still save for her golden hair blowing in the breeze, with Max faithfully positioned beside her. "Maybe it's just a phase," he offered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Kids do strange things sometimes." Sarah shook her head. "This isn't just strange, James. It's like she knows something, or she's waiting for something. Max never leaves her side either. That dog seems to share whatever expectation she has." James squeezed his wife's shoulder gently. "My grandmother used to say that some people are born with the sea in their blood, that they can hear things in the waves that others can't." He paused, watching his daughter. "Maybe Lily's just listening." That explanation didn't satisfy Sarah, but it was the best they had. Meanwhile, the entire town had noticed the ritual. Fishermen setting out in their boats would wave to Lily, but she rarely acknowledged them, her focus unwavering on some invisible point in the distance. The town's children would occasionally try to engage her in play, but during these morning vigils, she remained steadfast in her solitude, with only Max for company. Eleanor Whitman, the town's eldest resident at 93 years of age, observed the child's behavior with particular interest. From her porch overlooking the same stretch of beach, she would rock in her chair and watch Lily through binoculars, her weathered hands trembling slightly with age. "That child," she muttered to herself one morning, "she reminds me of someone." On a Tuesday in late July, everything changed. The tide had receded unusually far that morning, revealing stretches of the seafloor normally hidden beneath the waters. Lily had taken her customary position on the rocks, but Max seemed unusually restless. The golden retriever paced around her, whining softly, his nose twitching in the salt-laden air. Suddenly, as if responding to an unheard command, Max bounded toward a section of exposed beach near a collection of rocks that formed a small, natural alcove. With frantic energy, he began to dig, sand flying in all directions as his paws worked furiously at the wet ground. For the first time in months, Lily broke her statue-like vigil. She scrambled down from her perch and ran to Max, her small bare feet leaving impressions in the damp sand. By the time she reached him, the dog had unearthed something, a metal box roughly the size of a small book, corroded by years of saltwater exposure, but still intact. With trembling hands that betrayed an excitement she rarely displayed, Lily knelt beside Max and carefully extracted the box from its sandy tomb. The retriever sat back on his haunches, panting proudly, his tail sweeping arcs in the sand as if celebrating a job well done. Sarah, who had been hanging laundry in the yard, noticed the change in her daughter's routine and made her way down the worn path to the beach. By the time she arrived, Lily had managed to pry open the rusted latch of the box. "Lily, honey, what did you find?" Sarah asked, crouching beside her daughter. But Lily didn't answer. Her focus was entirely on the contents of the box. Old maps, yellow documents covered in strange symbols and codes, and what appeared to be logbooks, their pages stiff with age and exposure to the elements. Some of the writing was still legible, coordinates, dates, and names that meant nothing to Sarah, but seemed to captivate her daughter completely. "Weatherstone," Lily whispered, tracing a finger over a name that appeared repeatedly throughout the documents. Sarah felt a chill run through her that had nothing to do with the sea breeze. Weatherstone was her maiden name, a name that carried weight in Pelican Cove's history. More specifically, it was the name of her uncle, Dr. Thomas Weatherstone, a marine biologist who had vanished without a trace 15 years ago, before Lily was born. The town had conducted extensive searches, but no evidence of what happened to him had ever been found. Eventually, people stopped looking, and Thomas became another tragic tale in the town's folklore, a man who had loved the sea too much and was claimed by it. "How do you know that name, Lily?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible over the returning tide. Lily looked up at her mother, those sea-glass eyes reflecting something that looked remarkably like purpose. "He's been calling me," she said simply, as if this explained everything. Before Sarah could question her further, Max began barking excitedly, drawing their attention to the water's edge. The tide was coming in fast, already reclaiming the spot where the box had been buried. But there was something else, a glimmer beneath the surface, a flash of movement that didn't match the pattern of the waves. "Look, Mommy," Lily pointed, her voice filled with a certainty that sent another shiver down Sarah's spine. "There, still here, just like Uncle Thomas said they would be." Sarah squinted at the water, but could see nothing unusual. Yet Lily was already gathering the box's contents, carefully placing them back inside, with a reverence that seemed out of place in a child so young. "We need to show Daddy," Lily announced, cradling the box in her small arms. "And Ms. Eleanor, too. They'll understand." As they made their way back up the beach, Max trotting loyally beside them, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their lives in Pelican Cove were about to change dramatically. The peaceful rhythms of their coastal existence seemed suddenly precarious, like a sandcastle at the edge of the incoming tide. What she couldn't know, was just how right she was, and how the contents of that corroded metal box would not only unravel the mystery of her uncle's disappearance, but would transform their sleepy town forever, all guided by the small hands of a child who somehow seemed to have been expecting this moment all along. News traveled quickly in Pelican Cove. By nightfall, word had spread about Lily Anderson's discovery on the beach. James had carefully laid out the contents of the metal box on their kitchen table, maps with intricate markings, journals filled with scientific notations, and old photographs showing underwater caves and strange marine creatures. "These are definitely Thomas's," James confirmed, studying the handwriting in one of the journals. "I'd recognize his scribbles anywhere. We worked together on a few research projects before he..." before he disappeared. Sarah ran her fingers over a faded photograph of her uncle, tall and lean, with the same sea-glass eyes that Lily had inherited. But why would Lily know about him? We've barely mentioned him since she was born. They both turned to look at their daughter, who sat cross-legged on the living room floor with Max, meticulously arranging and rearranging the mysterious symbols copied from the documents onto pieces of paper. She worked with the focused concentration of a scholar, not a toddler. "Lily, sweetheart," James knelt beside her. "How did you know to look for this box?" Without looking up from her work, Lily replied, "I didn't look for it. Max found it when it was time." "When it was time," Sarah echoed. Lily nodded, continuing her arrangement of symbols. The water told Max, the low tide showed the way. James and Sarah exchanged worried glances. Before they could press further, a knock at the door interrupted them. Eleanor Whitman stood on their porch, her ancient frame supported by a wooden cane, her eyes bright with an energy that belied her years. "I heard about what the child found," she said without preamble. "I need to see it." James hesitated, but Sarah invited the old woman in. Eleanor had been a fixture in Pelican Cove longer than anyone alive, and if there were secrets to be uncovered, she likely knew more than most. Eleanor moved directly to the kitchen table, her eyes widening at the sight of the documents. "So it's true," she murmured, running a gnarled finger over one of the maps. "Thomas did leave something behind." "You knew?" Sarah's voice held a note of accusation. "You knew about whatever my uncle was working on?" Eleanor sank into a chair, suddenly looking every bit her 93 years. "I knew parts of it. Thomas swore me to secrecy before he left on his last expedition. He said the timing wasn't right, that the world wasn't ready for what he'd discovered." "And what exactly was that?" James asked, his patience wearing thin. Eleanor's gaze drifted to Lily, who had abandoned her symbols and was now standing in the kitchen doorway, listening intently. "A species," she said quietly. "A marine species, previously unknown to science. Something extraordinary. In Pelican Cove waters." James looked skeptical. "That's impossible. These waters have been fished, studied, and traversed for centuries. Not in the deep underwater caves," Eleanor countered. "Thomas found a network of them, accessible only during the lowest of tides and dangerous to explore without proper equipment. That's where they live, these creatures he discovered." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of creatures?" Before Eleanor could answer, Lily spoke up, her voice clear and confident. "The singing ones." All three adults turned to look at her. "The ones that sing with the tides," Lily continued, as if explaining something obvious. "Uncle Thomas called them echinae vocalis in his notes, but they're really the singing ones." Eleanor's face paled. "How could you possibly know that name, child? It was in Thomas's private research only." Lily shrugged, a disconcertingly adult gesture on her small frame. "I hear them sometimes, in the waves. They've been waiting for someone to find them again. They miss Uncle Thomas." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room, broken only when Max padded over to Lily and pressed against her leg protectively. "This is absurd," James finally said, though his voice lacked conviction. She's an imaginative child who happened to find an old research box." Eleanor shook her head slowly. "Thomas always said the singing ones could communicate somehow, that they had abilities beyond our understanding. He believed they could form connections with certain people who were receptive. Like a 3-year-old girl," Sarah asked incredulously. "Like someone with Weatherstone blood," Eleanor corrected. "Thomas was special too. He could sense things in the water that other researchers missed. It's why he was so successful in his field." "And you're suggesting Lily inherited this sensitivity?" James looked torn between disbelief and concern. "I'm suggesting," Eleanor said carefully, "that Thomas knew someone would come after him. He left these materials as breadcrumbs, knowing they would eventually be found by the right person. Sarah stood up abruptly. "This is crazy. You're talking about my daughter like she's some kind of chosen one." "Not chosen," Lily said softly, drawing everyone's attention again. "Just listening." She walked to the table and pointed to a specific location on one of the maps. "The cave is here. We need to go when the tide is lowest again. The singing ones are waiting." James ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Lily, honey, we can't just go exploring sea caves based on old maps. And whatever you think you're hearing." "Actually," Eleanor interjected, "we should. The lowest tide of the year is in 3 days. If Thomas's research is correct, the entrance to the main cave will be accessible for approximately 40 minutes. You can't seriously be suggesting we take our 3-year-old daughter into a potentially dangerous underwater cave," Sarah protested. Eleanor fixed her with a steady gaze. "I'm suggesting that if we don't, we might never understand what happened to Thomas, or why your daughter has been drawn to the water every day waiting. Besides," she added with the hint of a smile, "I know for a fact that at least 5 other people in town have already heard about the box and the maps. How long do you think it will be before someone else decides to investigate?" Sarah and James looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. They both knew that Eleanor was right. News traveled fast in Pelican Cove, and not everyone would have the best intentions when it came to a potentially groundbreaking scientific discovery. "We'll discuss it," James finally said, "but I want to examine these materials more thoroughly first." Eleanor nodded, satisfied. As she prepared to leave, she paused by Lily, who had returned to her arrangement of symbols. On the living room floor, to the adult's surprise, the old woman slowly lowered herself to sit beside the child. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the papers. Lily nodded, sliding some of her work toward Eleanor. Eleanor studied the arrangements, her eyes widening. "These aren't random," she whispered. "You're organizing them correctly. These are navigation markers, Thomas's special system. He designed it to map the underwater currents and cave systems." Lily beamed, pleased to be understood. "They show the safe path," she confirmed. "The dangerous parts are marked differently." "But how do you know this?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with both wonder and fear. Lily looked up at her mother, those sea-glass eyes reflecting wisdom no child should possess. "I just know," she said simply. "The same way I know the singing ones are real, and they need our help." After Eleanor left, the Anderson household fell into an uneasy silence. Sarah and James pored over the documents late into the night, trying to make sense of Thomas Weatherstone's research, occasionally startled by how accurately Lily had interpreted symbols and codes that should have been incomprehensible to her. Meanwhile, in other parts of Pelican Cove, different conversations were taking place. At the harbour master's office, Jack Mitchell, whose family owned most of the commercial property in town, was already making calls to contacts in the scientific community and private sector. "I'm telling you," he said into the phone, his voice low and urgent, "if this is what I think it is, we could be sitting on a gold mine, a previously undiscovered marine species, the pharmaceutical potential alone." And in her small cottage by the lighthouse, Eleanor Whitman carefully removed a floorboard in her bedroom, revealing a hidden compartment. From it, she extracted a slim leather journal, her own record of Thomas Weatherstone's work and the promise she had made to him 15 years ago. "The time has come, Thomas," she whispered to the empty room. "The child is ready, just as you said she would be." As night settled over Pelican Cove, a storm began brewing on the horizon. But the most significant tempest wasn't the one gathering over the Atlantic. It was the one about to engulf the small coastal town, as secrets long buried were finally unearthed. All because a little girl and her golden retriever had been in the right place at the right time. And beneath the waves, something stirred in response to Lily's discovery. something that had been waiting patiently for 15 long years. The next morning, Pelican Cove awakened to find itself divided. Word of the Anderson family's discovery had spread throughout the night, growing more elaborate with each telling. By breakfast time, half the town believed Thomas Weatherstone had found sunken treasure, while others speculated about ancient artifacts or evidence of shipwrecks. Few had guessed the truth, that whatever lay beneath the waters might be alive. "I don't like this, James," Sarah said as she glanced out their kitchen window at the small crowd that had gathered on the beach, near where Lily had found the box. Some carried metal detectors, others shovels. People are already getting worked up. James nodded grimly. "I called Charlie down at the ranger station. He's going to keep an eye on things, make sure nobody starts digging up protected shoreline." Lily sat at the table, unusually quiet as she ate her cereal, with Max lying faithfully at her feet. The dog hadn't left her side since the discovery. "Lily," Sarah began carefully, "did Uncle Thomas's notes say anything else about these singing ones? Anything that might help us understand what they are?" The little girl looked up. Her spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "They're special," she said simply. "They need the caves to be safe. Too much light hurts them." "Are they fish?" James asked, sitting down across from his daughter. Lily shook her head. "Not fish, different. They glow sometimes, but only when they sing. Uncle Thomas wrote that they might be the missing link." Sarah and James exchanged glances. "Missing link between what?" Sarah pressed. Before Lily could answer, the telephone rang. James answered it, his expression darkening as he listened. "I understand, Mayor Williams. Yes, we're aware of the situation. No, we haven't released any information publicly." He paused, listening. "With all due respect, what we found on public beach property isn't subject to town jurisdiction." "Yes, I understand the tourism implications." He hung up with more force than necessary. "Mayor's concerned about maintaining order and protecting town interests," he reported to Sarah. "Translation, Jack Mitchell's gotten to him already." "Mitchell?" Sarah frowned. "What does he have to do with this?" "Everything in this town eventually has to do with the Mitchells," James replied grimly. "Jack's probably already calculating how to monetize whatever your uncle discovered." A knock at the door interrupted them. Eleanor stood on the porch, accompanied by a tall, slender woman with silver-streaked black hair, Dr. Rebecca Chen, the marine biologist from the research center in the neighboring town of Harbor Point. "I took the liberty of contacting Rebecca," Eleanor explained as Sarah showed them in. "If we're going to understand Thomas's research, we need an expert." Dr. Chen's eyes immediately went to the documents spread across the kitchen table. "This is incredible," she breathed, picking up one of the journals. "These notations about bioluminescent properties in a previously unclassified species, and these anatomical sketches. If this is real, it could be revolutionary." "It's real," Lily piped up from her seat. "They're waiting for someone to help them." Dr. Chen looked at the child with surprise, then back to the adults questioningly. "Lily seems to have a connection to her uncle's research," Sarah explained hesitantly. "She's been correctly interpreting his coding system," Eleanor added. "A system that, to my knowledge, only Thomas fully understood." Dr. Chen knelt to Lily's level. "Can you tell me more about these creatures, Lily? What do they look like?" "They're beautiful," Lily answered without hesitation. "They have long bodies that move like ribbons in the water. Their skin changes colors when they sing. They have big eyes that can see in the dark caves. And they're smart as people, maybe smarter." Dr. Chen's scientific skepticism visibly warred with her fascination. "And you've seen them?" "In my dreams," Lily said, "and sometimes when I look at the water just right, I can see shadows of them. They're scared now. People are too close to their home." As if confirming Lily's assessment, they heard raised voices outside. James moved to the window to see Jack Mitchell standing on the beach with several men, including Mayor Williams. They appeared to be arguing with Charlie from the ranger station. "This isn't good," James muttered. "They're getting serious about this. The tide will be at its lowest point tomorrow morning," Dr. Chen noted, studying one of the maps. "If Thomas's calculations are correct, the cave entrance will be accessible for approximately 45 minutes, from 6:15 to 7 a.m. "We need to be there first," Eleanor said firmly, "before Mitchell and his fortune hunters." Sarah looked at her daughter, torn between maternal protectiveness and the growing certainty that Lily was somehow meant to be part of this discovery. "I don't like the idea of taking her into a potentially dangerous cave system." "I'll go," James volunteered. "Rebecca can come with me. We'll document whatever's there and bring the evidence back." "No," Lily said with surprising authority. "The singing ones won't show themselves unless I'm there. They're waiting for me. Uncle Thomas told them I would come." The adults exchanged uncomfortable glances. "How could Thomas have known about you?" Sarah asked gently. "He disappeared before you were born, Lily." The little girl shrugged. "He just knew. He left a message for me in his special code. It says, 'My niece will have the sea in her eyes and the songs in her heart. She will finish what I started.'" Dr. Chen looked skeptical, but Eleanor was nodding. Thomas always had a sense about things. It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. Before they could discuss further, Max suddenly stood alert, his ears perked. A moment later, they heard footsteps on the porch, followed by a confident knock. Jack Mitchell stood at the door, his expensive sailing clothes at odds with the practical attire of most Pelican Cove residents. Behind him, Mayor Williams shifted uncomfortably. "James, Sarah," Mitchell greeted them with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I understand you've made quite the discovery." "What do you want, Jack?" James asked bluntly. Mitchell's smile tightened. "Just to talk. As the town's primary investor and someone with connections to several marine research institutions, I think I could be of assistance in properly handling whatever your little girl found." "Properly handling?" Sarah repeated skeptically. Of course," Mitchell continued smoothly. "If there's a scientific discovery to be made here, we should ensure it benefits everyone, the scientific community, the town, and of course your family. I have contacts who would pay handsomely for exclusive research rights." "It's not for sale," Lily piped up from behind her parents, her small face set in determination. Mitchell's gaze shifted to the child, his expression a mixture of amusement and annoyance. "Well, hello there, young lady. This is grown-up business, but I appreciate your input. The singing ones don't belong to anyone," Lily continued undeterred. "Uncle Thomas said they need to be protected, not studied or captured." Mitchell's eyes narrowed slightly. "Singing ones? What an active imagination." He turned back to James and Sarah. "I'm prepared to make a very generous offer for whatever information you've discovered, enough to ensure Lily's college education and then some." "We're not interested," James said firmly. "And as I already told the mayor, we found these items on public beach property. They legally belong to us." Mitchell's friendly facade slipped for a moment. "I'd reconsider if I were you. Scientific discoveries can be complicated. Proper attribution, research funding, publication rights. Without the right connections, your uncle's work could end up buried in academic bureaucracy for years." "Is that a threat?" Sarah asked, stepping forward. "Just a reality check," Mitchell replied smoothly. "Think about it. I'll be in touch." With a nod to the mayor, he turned and left. As the door closed behind them, Dr. Chen let out a low whistle. "He's not going to give up that easily." "No, he won't," Eleanor agreed, "which means we need to move quickly. The town is already dividing into factions, those who see dollar signs and those who respect that some discoveries should remain protected." "We can't wait until tomorrow morning," James decided. "Mitchell will have people watching the beach by then. We need to go tonight." Tonight? Sarah looked alarmed. The tide won't be low enough. It won't be optimal, Dr. Chen conceded, checking the tide charts in Thomas's notes. But it should be low enough to access at least the outer chamber of the cave system around midnight. We'd have maybe 20 minutes instead of 45. That's enough, Lily asserted confidently. I can find the way. Sarah knelt before her daughter, taking her small hands. Lily, this could be dangerous. These caves, they're underwater most of the time. If the tide comes in too quickly, Max will protect me, Lily said, as the golden retriever pressed against her side. He always knows when the water is changing, and the singing ones will help too. James and Sarah shared a look, the silent communication of parents weighing their child's safety against other considerations. Finally, James nodded. We'll go tonight, all of us, including Max. But at the first sign of danger, we're turning back. No arguments. As they began preparing for the midnight expedition, gathering flashlights, waterproof bags for the documents, and appropriate clothing, Sarah pulled Eleanor aside. You've known about my uncle's discovery all this time, she said quietly. Why didn't you ever say anything? Eleanor's weathered face was solemn. Thomas made me promise. He said the creatures needed time to trust, time to decide if they wanted to be known to our world. He said when the time was right, they would choose their ambassador. Her gaze drifted to Lily, who was helping James pack a small backpack. I never imagined it would be a child. I'm still not convinced this isn't some elaborate treasure hunt game that Lily has constructed in her imagination, Sarah admitted. But there's so much she seems to know. The Weatherstone gift, Eleanor nodded. Thomas had it too, an intuition about the sea and its secrets that went beyond scientific knowledge. Some called it a sixth sense. Others called it madness. But he was never wrong. Across the room, Lily had stopped packing and was standing perfectly still, her head tilted as if listening to something only she could hear. Max mimicked her posture. His ears perked forward, his eyes fixed on the same invisible point. What is it, Lily? James asked, noticing her trance-like state. They're singing, she whispered, a smile spreading across her face. They know we're coming. Midnight painted Pelican Cove in shades of silver and black as the small group made their way down to the beach. James led with a dimmed flashlight, followed by Sarah holding Lily's hand. Behind them came Dr. Chen carrying scientific equipment and Eleanor moving slowly but determinedly with her cane. Max padded alongside Lily, occasionally running ahead to scout the path, then returning to her side. The beach was eerily quiet, the usual symphony of night insects, muted by the anticipation that hung heavy in the air. A half moon provided just enough illumination to silhouette the rocky outcropping where Thomas's maps indicated the cave entrance would be revealed. We're in luck, James whispered as they approached the water's edge. The tide's already out. Further than expected, Dr. Chen consulted a small tide chart. We should have about 25 minutes before it starts to return. Not much time to explore. It's enough, Lily assured them, her voice carrying a confidence that startled the adults. She pulled free from Sarah's grip and walked directly toward a specific section of exposed rocks, with Max trotting faithfully beside her. Lily, wait, Sarah called, but the girl didn't slow down. Instead, she navigated the slippery rocks with surprising agility, stopping before what appeared to be a solid wall of stone. Max sniffed at the base of the wall, tail wagging excitedly. It's here, Lily announced, pressing her small hands against the rock face. The door to their home. James hurried to join her, playing his flashlight over the area. At first it appeared to be nothing but solid stone, but as the beam moved across the surface he noticed a dark crevice, partially obscured by seaweed and barnacles. There is something here, he confirmed, excitement creeping into his voice. A narrow opening. Dr. Chen approached with a more powerful light, revealing a passage barely wide enough for an adult to squeeze through. "This matches the entrance described in Thomas's notes," she said, pulling out a waterproof tablet to compare the location with the digitized maps. "This has to be it." Eleanor hung back, leaning heavily on her cane. "I'll keep watch from here," she said, settling onto a dry rock. "Someone needs to make sure Mitchell's people don't follow you in." James nodded gratefully, then turned to Sarah. "Maybe you should stay with Eleanor. I can take Lily." "I'm coming," Sarah said firmly. "We do this as a family." James didn't argue. Instead, he adjusted his headlamp and prepared to enter the EE passage. "Stay close behind me. Lily, you hold your mother's hand the entire time. Understood?" The little girl nodded solemnly, but there was an unmistakable gleam of excitement in her sea-glass eyes. One by one, they squeezed through the narrow opening, with Max somehow managing to wriggle his golden body through the tight space. The passage immediately widened into a small chamber, the walls glistening with moisture and embedded with tiny iridescent shells that reflected their flashlight beams like miniature stars. "Amazing," Dr. Chen breathed, running her hand along one wall. "This cavity must be completely submerged most of the time, yet it's teeming with life." She pointed to clusters of unusual sea anemones and delicate formations that resembled coral but seemed to pulse with a subtle rhythm. "Look," Lily whispered, pointing ahead. "The next door." At the back of the chamber was another passage, this one descending at a gentle slope. As they proceeded cautiously, the air grew noticeably warmer and carried a strange, sweet scent, reminiscent of salt but with undertones of something floral and unfamiliar. The second passage opened into a much larger cavern, its ceiling rising. Beyond the reach of their lights, a shallow pool occupied the center, its water so clear it seemed almost invisible, save for the gentle ripples disturbing its surface. "This is incredible," James said, his voice echoing slightly. "A completely hidden ecosystem." Dr. Chen was already taking samples and readings. "The water temperature is significantly warmer than the ocean outside, and these bioluminescent algae formations, I've never seen anything like them." But Lily wasn't interested in the scientific marvel surrounding them. She walked directly to the edge of the pool, with Max following close behind. There she sat cross-legged, placed her small hands on the smooth stone, and closed her eyes. "Lily?" Sarah approached cautiously. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" "Calling them," Lily replied without opening her eyes. "They're shy." The adults exchanged skeptical glances, but their doubt evaporated moments later when the pool's surface began to glow with a soft blue light that seemed to pulse from deep below. The light gradually intensified, revealing what appeared to be an underwater tunnel extending from the pool into darkness. And then they heard it, a sound unlike anything they'd ever experienced before. It wasn't quite music, nor was it speech, but something in between, melodic vibrations that seemed to resonate not just in their ears, but throughout their entire bodies. "The singing ones," Lily whispered reverently. From the illuminated tunnel emerged a creature that defied conventional classification. About the size of a dolphin, it moved with the fluid grace of a ribbon dancer, its elongated body shimmering with patterns of light that changed with each movement. Its large, expressive eyes fixed immediately on Lily, regarding her with unmistakable intelligence. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed, instinctively moving closer to her daughter. The creature didn't retreat. Instead, it approached the edge where Lily sat, its body continuing to emit pulses of bioluminescence that synchronized with the haunting sounds filling the cavern. "That's impossible," Dr. Chen whispered, her scientific detachment momentarily overwhelmed. "It's communicating through light patterns and acoustic vibrations simultaneously. The complexity suggests sentience," James finished for her, awestruck. The creature extended what appeared to be a delicate tendril toward Lily, Without hesitation, the little girl reached out her own small hand, her face alight with joy. "Lily, no!" Sarah lunged forward to stop her, but Max intercepted, gently blocking her path with his body. "It's okay, Mommy," Lily assured her. "They're friends. They were Uncle Thomas's friends too." The tendril and Lily's fingertips connected in a gossamer touch, and at that moment, more of the creatures emerged from the tunnel, filling the pool with their luminous presence. The cavern became a symphony of light and sound, the creatures' communications growing more complex and beautiful by the second. Dr. Chen fumbled with her equipment, trying to document the incredible encounter, but her hands were trembling too much. "This is beyond anything in scientific record," she managed. "They appear to be communicating directly with Lily." Indeed, the little girl seemed to be in a state of communion with the creatures, her expression one of perfect understanding. After several minutes, she turned to the adults, her eyes shining with excitement. "They say Uncle Thomas isn't gone," she announced. "He went with them to their deeper home. He wanted to learn everything about them before telling the world they exist." "That's not possible," Sarah whispered, though doubt colored her voice. "No human could survive underwater for 15 years. They can make special places where humans can breathe," Lily explained patiently. "Uncle Thomas has been helping them. They're worried because their home is changing, getting warmer, getting polluted. They need our help now." James knelt beside his daughter. "What do they want us to do, Lily?" Before she could answer, a loud commotion echoed from the entrance passage. Eleanor's voice could be heard, raised in alarm, followed by the sounds of multiple people entering the cave. "Mitchell," James growled, rising to his feet. Moments later, Jack Mitchell appeared at the passage entrance, flanked by two men carrying professional camera equipment and Mayor Williams, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Well now," Mitchell drawled, his eyes widening at the spectacle before him. "This is certainly worth the investment." "Get out," James demanded, stepping protectively in front of the pool. "You have no right to be here." Mitchell's smile was cold. "Public property, James, just like the beach where your little girl found that box." He gestured to his cameraman. "Start documenting everything. This is going to make quite the presentation for my investors." The creatures in the pool reacted immediately to the intrusion, their harmonious sounds turning discordant, their light patterns flickering anxiously. Several retreated toward the underwater tunnel. "No, wait!" Lily cried out, distressed. "You're scaring them!" Mitchell ignored her, stepping further into the cavern. "Fascinating specimens, some kind of bioluminescent cephalopod, perhaps. The pharmaceutical applications alone could be worth millions." As the cameramen advanced, their harsh lights flooding the cavern, the delicate ecosystem seemed to recoil. The once peaceful chamber now felt tense and unstable. Suddenly, Max began to bark frantically, running back toward the entrance passage. At the same moment, Dr. Chen's equipment emitted a shrill alarm. "The tide!" she exclaimed, checking her instruments. "It's coming in much faster than predicted. We have minutes, not the 15 we thought." "Everyone out now," James ordered, grabbing Lily by the shoulders. "The passage will flood." Mitchell hesitated, only briefly, before signaling his men to retreat. "This isn't over," he called back as they scrambled toward the exit. "I'll be filing claim papers tomorrow." Sarah reached for Lily, but the little girl pulled away, turning back to the pool where the creatures were disappearing into their tunnel. "We can't leave them," she insisted, tears streaming down her face. "Mitchell will come back with more people. He'll hurt them." "Lily, we have no choice," Sarah pleaded. "The water is rising. We'll find another way to protect them, I promise." The little girl stood firm, her sea glass eyes reflecting a wisdom beyond her years. Max returned to her side, pressing against her leg supportively. "There is another way," she said with calm certainty. "They showed me." She pointed to a narrow opening on the far side of the cavern, barely visible in the receding light as the creatures continued their retreat. That leads to higher ground, and then back to the beach through another exit. Uncle Thomas used it. James played his flashlight. Across the indicated area. Are you sure? Lily nodded. The singing ones never lie. She knelt beside the pool one last time, placing her palm against the surface. We'll protect you, she promised, just like Uncle Thomas did. As if in response, one final creature emerged briefly, illuminating the cavern with a brilliant pulse of blue-green light before disappearing into the depths. With the sound of rushing water growing louder behind them, the group followed Lily to the hidden passage. True to her word, it led upward, away from the rapidly flooding chambers below. The tunnel was narrow and winding, but consistently ascended, until, nearly 20 minutes later, they emerged onto a small, secluded cove, half a mile down the beach from where they had entered. Eleanor was waiting for them, somehow having made her way along the shoreline. Her face broke into a relieved smile at the sight of them. Thank heavens, when the tide rushed in, I feared the worst. How did you know we'd come out here? James asked, helping Dr. Chen navigate the slippery rocks. Eleanor's eyes twinkled. Thomas showed me this exit years ago. It was his emergency route. As they regrouped on the beach, Mitchell and his party could be seen in the distance, soaked and disgruntled as they made their way back toward town. This isn't over, Sarah said, watching them go. Mitchell won't give up that easily. No, James agreed grimly. He won't. But we have something he doesn't, Lily piped up, her face serene despite the night's ordeals. She pulled from her pocket a small, pearlescent object given to her by the creatures, a kind of key according to what they had communicated to her. The real entrance to their home, the one Mitchell will never find. The following weeks transformed Pelican Cove. News of the discovery leaked despite their efforts, drawing marine biologists, environmental activists, and government officials to the sleepy town. But the exact location of the underwater cave system remained a secret, known only to those who had witnessed the singing ones firsthand. Mitchell's attempts to stake claim to the discovery were thwarted when Dr. Chen, with the backing of her research institution, filed for protected status for the entire coastline, citing the presence of a newly discovered, critically endangered species. The petition was fast-tracked when several prominent scientists, colleagues of Thomas Weatherstone, came forward with additional documentation supporting the need for conservation. The town itself underwent a change of heart as Lily, with her simple wisdom and unwavering conviction, shared the story of the singing ones with anyone who would listen. Not the scientific details that might put them at risk, but the essence of what they represented. An intelligent species that had existed alongside humanity for centuries, undetected, communicating through beauty rather than words. 1 month after their discovery, on a bright morning with the clearest skies Pelican Cove had seen in years, the entire town gathered on the beach for a ceremony. The area surrounding the hidden caves was being officially designated as the Thomas Weatherstone Marine Sanctuary, permanently protected from development or exploitation. Mayor Williams, who had ultimately sided with the conservation efforts against Mitchell's commercial interests, stood at a small podium addressing the assembled crowd. Today marks a new chapter for our town. We have been entrusted with a priceless natural wonder, and with that comes great responsibility. As he spoke, Lily sat at her usual spot on the rocks, with Max beside her and her parents standing proudly behind. But she wasn't staring out at the horizon as she once did. Now, she was watching the waves with the satisfied smile of someone who had completed an important mission. Eleanor made her way over to join them, moving more easily now with a new cane gifted by the grateful town. Thomas would be proud, she said softly to Sarah, of both of you. Sarah nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. Do you think we'll ever see him again? I believe so, Eleanor replied, glancing meaningfully at Lily. When the time is right. The sea keeps its promises, just as the Weatherstones keep theirs. As the ceremony concluded, Dr. Chen approached with exciting news. "The research grant has been approved," she announced. "We'll be establishing a permanent monitoring station with strict protocols to ensure minimal intrusion." And she added with a smile for Lily, "They've approved my request for a special consultant position." Lily's eyes widened. "Me? Who better?" Dr. Chen laughed. "You're the only human the Singing Ones trust completely." "Besides Uncle Thomas," Lily corrected. "Besides him," Dr. Chen acknowledged, "though I suspect he'll be making his way back to us soon, now that the Singing Ones have an official human protector." That evening, a sunset painted the sky in hues that rivaled the bioluminescence of the mysterious creatures. The Anderson family sat on their porch, watching the tide roll in. The once quiet beach now hummed with the respectful activity of researchers and conservationists setting up the new sanctuary boundaries. "I still can't believe all this started with you sitting on those rocks day after day," James said, ruffling Lily's hair affectionately. "I was listening," Lily said simply. "Most people just forgot how." Max, lounging at her feet, lifted his head suddenly, ears perked toward the water. A moment later, a faint, melodious vibration reached them, barely perceptible, but unmistakably the song of their underwater neighbors. Lily smiled and closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. "They're saying thank you," she translated, "and welcome home." Sarah and James exchanged glances, knowing their daughter would always be the bridge between two worlds, the human one she was born into, and the mysterious realm beneath the waves that had claimed her heart. As darkness settled over Pelican Cove, lights could be seen bobbing offshore, boats carrying curious visitors, hoping for a glimpse of the now famous marine sanctuary. But the real magic remained hidden, protected by the unlikely partnership of a little girl, a faithful dog, and creatures that sang with the tides. And somewhere in the depths, Thomas Weatherstone continued his work, knowing that his legacy and the extraordinary beings he had dedicated his life to protecting were finally in the right hands. Dear listeners, we hope that Lily Anderson's extraordinary journey through the whispering tides has captivated your imagination. The connection between a child's innocent wisdom and nature's most mysterious wonders reminds us that sometimes the most important voices are those we've forgotten how to hear. If this tale of discovery and protection spoke to your heart, please subscribe to our channel and like this video to support more stories that bridge the gap between our world and the unexplored mysteries that surround us. We've created a special playlist of similarly enchanting narratives about unexpected heroes and hidden wonders. Find it by clicking to your left. What secrets do you think might be waiting in the waters near your own hometown? Share your thoughts in the comments below and join us tomorrow for another journey into the extraordinary depths of human connection and natural wonder. The Singing Ones may be fictional, but the call to protect our oceans is very real. We're listening for your voice to join the chorus.